Yeah, I just started the broadcast. It'll take a second, but you can go ahead and get going.
Okay, well, we have a lot of things to get through. So there's a bit of an echo. If you're not talking, if you could mute, that would be great. Okay, so let's get started. Is Meta on yet?
I am. I'm here. Hello.
Okay, great. Meta, you want to kick off with a technical update, and then we'll talk about some business stuff.
Absolutely. Okay, so good morning, everyone. I have started providing written technical updates for the community. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my written format here, but for the pleasure of folks on the line, I will go ahead and use this as a basis for my update today. So we are working very hard on getting a roadmap out to the community, and others have had a lot of requests for roadmaps, so we'll be providing that. I am working on a internal flavor for review by the development team. Obviously, they need to buy into the dates that we intend on publishing, so I hope to have that ready by the end of this week. And to that end, I'm meeting with a lot of the folks on the dev team to try to gain clarity on how certain pieces of the project will come together and how long that will take. Of course, with any roadmap, we're going to be aiming at looking at big rocks, big milestones, as things could shift forward and back, as this is very new, cutting edge technology, and there's research pieces involved as well. And we can't really time constrain those too much, except say, oh my gosh, do we have a fallback plan? So that's also things that I'll be working on. We went through sprint entry this week. We have a fairly large number of developers now, so we split the development team into 3 big groups. And if you saw my previous written update, we have a Node team, a Golang compiler team, and then we have a virtual machine team. So those are the 3 large buckets that we've kind of split the 2 into. And sprint entry went extremely well this week. The teams were able to go a lot deeper into their functional areas and really talk about what their next set of deliverables looked like. So I was very pleased about that. The number of meetings on my dashboard tripled, but for the development team, there was no net change in their meetings, but they were much more productive. We are focusing on delivering the SDK.1. I am pushing for end of January. I know I've put out there early February, but I'm really pushing to get this done by the end of Jan. So that means ideally, by the time we exit the sprint, we will have an SDK release that we can release to the community. So very excited about that. We have, to that end, we are updating the Golang specification and tutorial to match what the compiler supports. We're improving the compiler to provide line numbers for errors during compile time. You know, some basic usability things that as people work with the SDK, we want them to be able to do some basic things to troubleshoot the contracts they'll be writing. Packaging and user experience. We will be delivering a Docker image. We felt that was a very easy way for people to interact with our releases, so we'll be continuing that model. We've got the Rosette C++ VM ready for the SDK, so we've done a lot of work to bring it up to modern tools. It still uses 32-bit addressing, but it is ready for prime time. So not prime time, but for the SDK prime time. And we're going to offer a download version of the web compiler. So this is a really cool thing that the community was able to run across the finish line for us. There will be a web interface to the compiler for those individuals that don't want to use a different editing tool. It's a very nice interface that allows you to load up or author some Golang and run it and view the Rosette debug output all within a browser. So it's a very cool user experience, and we're going to be offering that as part of the SDK package. So if you don't want to deal with running Rosette separately and running the compiler separately, you can just do it via a browser. So very nice stuff there. Compiler team is focusing on the features that are needed for Golang for Mercury. So I've been pushing on the compiler team to give me a roadmap. And to that end, they are working on determining the scope that's needed for Mercury in the language, and then working back the work that's needed to be implemented in the compiler. And we're also documenting, creating some documentation around economics, right? How we're going to do cost enforcement, and our reasonings on why we did it that way. We're implementing structural equivalence as part of the type checker in the compiler. Lots of pull requests going through. So it's just a flurry of activity on the development team. We're also got the tuple space reimplementation. That's in code review. Kent did that work, and that's a very large pull request. So large in terms of functionality. So people are really spending a lot of time reviewing his work, and so we can get that merged in quickly. The Node team is working on the Node HTTP API. So we will need an interface for Node operators to interact with the node, logging, monitoring, resource utilization, these kinds of basic functions. We'll need to expose that to node operators. So we're starting the work on designing that API and figuring out also how what we will expose first. So in all probability, we will start exposing some of the communication niceties because that's already in the node. But that will let us lay down the API interface, lay down the node container, and then start exposing some very basic communications pieces. And this is probably the next incremental release we'll do for the node, is to offer the node container and some HTTP interfaces. We've also got the node community test planned for this Thursday morning at 8:30. Join us in node-testing on Discord. If you have a node, we ask that you do an update. I think Chris is going to have a new Docker image either today, probably end of day today, it has to be, so we can get those Docker images, the nodes updated, and then run the test tomorrow morning. Jeremy's building that Docker image, so look for an update. I will be putting an update on the node testing channel when the new image is ready for everybody to update. We're also going to be doing some...
Sorry, Matt, will the only update be available via Docker?
Well, no, I think it's going to go into GitHub first, right? So it'll be in GitHub, and then off of GitHub, we'll build the Docker image. So it'll be in Git as well as in Docker.
Great, thank you.
Yep, absolutely. We're also going to be doing some node penetration testing. We've got some separate infrastructure that we're going to provision for that. And we're going to do some security and pen testing separate to what we're doing with the community. And the Rosette team, lots of work on the Scala side. They took on a huge commitment for this sprint, 100 story points. That's like 3 times what they've ever done before. Tim is extremely motivated to get a lot of opcodes built. I think he believes that he'll be able to get a lot of opcodes implemented in this next sprint. And they're focusing on trying to run helloworld.row. So that will be very cool if we can actually get them to run a very simple contract in the VM. So that's a big, exciting thing that I hope they can get done. So that's what they're focused on. It's a very long update, lots of content there. So I encourage you all to look at the written synopsis as well. Any questions?
I had one more. Let's see. In the chat here, I posted a link to something the Ethereum folks did early on when they were launching their nodes. There's a optional setting that you can turn on your node that publishes public information about your node, and then it accumulates it all into one central dashboard, so you can get an idea of network health on an opt-in basis. Would that be something we could look into, as well as having a dashboard for private uses?
I absolutely think so, yes. So I've seen ethstats.net, and I believe the full intention is to have that. And for sure, yes. Yep. Greg, yes.
Yeah. Sorry. With respect to the Node API, as I get more involved with the exchanges, both Lika and Bittrex, they have APIs that should also serve as requirements for the Node API. So I'll be pumping those back to you, and hopefully Chris will come back with some when we head out to the Perm School and talk to the Lika folks.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Yes, if you could send those over to me, that'd be great. Just shoot me an email if you happen to have it, or you can link me to some documentation. That would be fantastic.
I won't get it until I talk to them, right? So
okay.
That's part of the reason I'm going out there, is to talk to their engineers.
Awesome. Terrific. Looking forward to that. Thank you.
Sure. Cool. That was a great update. Any more questions in the community?
One more about the API. Well, that do we have an idea of what that syntax would look like?
Not yet. We don't. We are open to feedback. We probably will follow the idea of a REST API. We've got nouns and verbs, right? Resources and verbs and certain actions. So we are still in the process, very much in the process of designing the API. I don't see any reason why we would break away too much from what Ethereum does, but we want to make it significantly better. So the goal is to make the API very pleasant to use, right? So we are designing it with developers in mind.
So Web3 is kind of the idea here.
Yes.
But if I remember, Web3 is also like that particular Web3.js is I guess you can implement an API in whatever language you want, but would there be any priority given to the so-called like the easiest way to interact with the API? In what language, I mean?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It should be the case that interacting with the API from any of the JVM languages will be much easier than, so any of the JVM languages plus HTTP versus anything else will be, just be like falling off a log.
So then a JavaScript for web applications would be it's like a second tier type of offering?
Second tier, yeah.
Any other questions? Going once, going twice. Catch me on Discord if you have further questions. Thank you.
Sweet. Thank you. That was a very excellent update. So some other things for us to think about. Actually, before I go into those, Lawrence had some updates. So Lawrence, you want to take that away?
Yeah, it's been a crazy good week. Let me keep it really brief. Hit me up on Discord. First thing, we've got a big event, our first RChain meetup in San Francisco, Wednesday night, 6 to 8. So if you're in town, please join us. We are ramping up marketing, kind of taking it to the next level. Some of the folks that who've started to work with us as partners at Holdings come from Amazon and Microsoft with a huge pedigree. And they've not only launched products, but platforms. So these are guys from the platform team. We've got about a half dozen people who've jumped on board working with Patrick and myself to really take it to the next level of how you make RChain a community platform and reach out to the global world. So we're going to see a lot of really exciting things. They were the ones who introduced me to Runway in San Francisco, where we're hosting this. It's an extremely well-known space. There are 70 startups there. I'm going to try and work my way through a good chunk of them with introductions while I'm in San Francisco. I'm also meeting a group of 20 Chinese investors, courtesy of one of our other partners. So it's going to be a super busy week. Ed and I met with the Swarm team. So storage is hot for us in terms of partnerships. We learned an awful lot of interesting stuff. Greg, thank you for the introduction. They're going to be foundational as we start creating working groups sort of around the deep technical needs, industry needs that each group has got. So storage is number 2. We've already started with identity. We've got 2 companies, possibly a third. One is Life ID, the other one's called Verify, in that space that we're getting into identity working groups. Just checking. Oh, and Verify is again a very interesting one. So for the devs, it's they do background checks. So they're actually a vertical application on top of identity. So we're starting to see these things. Meta, you keep asking what's going on, what are people asking for? We're going to have real working groups with technical founders, executives, and business people to start giving us really consolidated information. We are done with the logo. I know I'm going really fast. And that change will happen over the next 2 weeks. Patrick, Valeria, and I, and the entire community, thank you all so much for participating in this. I've gotten that information out. And we've already got 45 people signed up for this Hangout, so please join us. Thanks.
Thanks, Lawrence. That was fantastic. Really appreciate it. Okay, so we have a bunch of stuff in addition to all of that. So looks like we're closing the PyRefX deal this week. So very, very excited about that. And that puts us in a much more sort of mutually supportive relationship, I guess is the way to put it. So I'm very happy to be concluding that. We're settling now on the actual venue for the governance forum. I have to do a couple of field trips today. I meant to get them done a couple of days ago, but just couldn't. But after my field trips, I will be able to report on the selection of the venue there. But we've got some really good venues that are competing, so I'm very excited about that. I really want to encourage everyone to come to the governance forum. This is going to be important. Every stakeholder community should be overrepresented. So to that end, I know I've seen a lot of stuff about the co-op helping fund travel for members, and I'm fully in support of that. So I've created a place for people to send travel support requests. So I'll put that in the chat right now. So here we go. So it's it's interesting. Okay. Okay, so if you want support for travel from the co-op to attend the governance forum, please email that address there, rchain.request@gmail.com, and please put in the subject title governance forum support requests. Right? So if you do that, then I personally will make sure to review it and see what the co-op can do in terms of supporting your participation in the governance forum. We have a very exciting lineup. So just some highlights, as I've mentioned before, Mukara Meredith, who's worked with a lot of Fortune 100 companies, will be will be helping RChain accelerate its group genius. You know Vlad, so Vlad will be helping formulate the language around blockchain governance. We also have a team that's going to help us with games, and games as a means of accessing sort of the group intelligence. And we also will have a visit from the Seattle Circle. The Seattle Circle has been working over 30 years on circular and orchestral techniques for self-assembly and self-organization. Additionally, we will have presence from the Third Horizon University, and with luck, Tony Hodgson will be joining us via Zoom. Tony's in his 80s now, so the flight over seems a bit disruptive for him, but he'll be available via Zoom, and then the Third Horizon university folks who will be able to be there on the ground will support Tony in helping us look at sustainability, so Tony's organizational sustainability. So there's that, and then we have on Saturday night we will have a performance from Tiny Orchestral Moments, which has a lineup of some of the best musicians you have ever heard, world-class musicians. So I'm very excited about that, and there might be a surprise performance, but I can't say more just yet. But already the bill is quite well filled out. So I'm very, very excited. We will. So also for those people who are interested, we're going to be holding a Tai Chi every morning from 7:15 to 8:15 with a special presentation from Viola Brumbau, who is a student of Chen Zhenglei, as well as Master David Lung. So this is Grandmaster Chen Zhenglei. She's quite an accomplished Tai Chi practitioner herself. So on Saturday mornings, she's agreed to come and help with the Tai Chi. And I just want to touch base on why some of these techniques are being presented during the governance forum, or why we might be interested in them. And I'll do that in terms of a little personal anecdote here. So this past week I was supposed to be the 108. So we'll do portions of the young long form, the 108, not the 24. So I'll be leading on Thursday morning, Friday morning. Viola will do Tai Chi on Saturday morning, and then I'll lead a session on Sunday morning. Anyway, so a lot of these techniques, whether we're talking about Mukara's matrix works techniques for accelerating group genius, or Tai Chi, or the circular and orchestral techniques from the Seattle Circle, all of these have to do with being able to tap into a kind of organizational intelligence. And I really want to compare it with an experience I just had. So I flew down to Costa Rica to participate in a Tai Chi retreat and to play a concert down in Costa Rica. So naturally, because I was playing a concert, I took my guitar. Well, Delta decided to swallow my guitar. So this is a concert series, Martin. With a Tonewood amplifier in the case. The case itself was a Hiscox Light Flight case. The case alone was worth 150 pounds. Anyway, so I spent about 35 hours of my retreat trying to engage Delta to find my guitar. And why is this related to RChain? Well, the reason it's related is because essentially Delta is a decentralized organization. There is no center, as near as I can tell, at least for most of the parties that one engages in, and they don't have a blockchain. So there is no record of reference. There's no truth. There's no version of truth that the Delta employees can rely upon. And so unfortunately, they end up. So I spoke with over 35 Delta employees. About half of them ended up lying to me. I don't think it was intentional, but it was because their view of the situation on the ground was just false, and they had no way to know whether or not that view was false. In addition, there were only two heroes within the 35 or so Delta employees that I spoke with. Only two of them had a sense of what personal responsibility was, or what accountability was, or what follow-through was. And all three of those are sort of qualities that I think we're going to have effective decentralized organizations. I was speaking with someone at the Tai Chi retreat, and I said it. I put it as bluntly as I could. The kind of organizational intelligence that Delta was demonstrating to me is not the kind of organizational intelligence that's going to be able to respond to climate change. We need a fun. So again, go back to this fall when Neil deGrasse Tyson is on CNN saying, we don't have the technology to move our coastal cities inland by 20 miles in the next 20 years. So we need to think about as crisply and as soberly as we can what it's going to take in terms of our organizational intelligence to be able to move with that kind of speed. And what I want to submit to this community, and especially to the people who participate in the governance forum, that in order to have the kind of organization, decentralized organization, that can move with the agility, intelligence, and will necessary to get stuff done, they need other kinds of technologies. They need other kinds of social technologies that have been around for quite some time. So whether we're talking about Tai Chi, or we're talking about the kinds of techniques that the Seattle Circle have been developing from a long history, going back at least 100 years. Those are the kinds of social intelligence technologies that are going to make the sorts of organizations that will be necessary in order to meet the oncoming demands of our existing society. I don't know. I don't want to put too fine a point on it. It's the demands that are coming down the pipe are really enormous, and we have to have the kinds of organizations that can handle those. And in order to do that, we don't just need a sort of distributed and decentralized source of truth. We also need additional social and organizational technologies. And so I want to put those people who are interested in RChain governance in touch with those technologies, so that they can test them for themselves, see for themselves what's workable, what's not workable, and begin to put them into practice. So that's another reason why I would encourage you to come to the governance forum, to get a taste of what some of these other technologies might be like, and what they can do in terms of our agility and ability to act in the world, and make the first cooperatively run, publicly owned, publicly operated blockchain a success. So that's just and the other point is that we then get to model that kind of thing for other organizations like Delta Airlines. Okay, so enough about that. But I'm extremely excited about the governance forum, and I want to encourage everyone to come. Whatever stakeholder communities you're involved in, please come, have your voice heard, and help make RChain governance a success. Okay, moving right along, we have some other updates that are sort of a organizational nature. The DFI, so that's Department of Finance in Washington, contacted the CoOp and asked for specific information about the nature of the CoOp, which we supplied, and they came back requesting more information, specifically as was related to the private sale. So I want the CoOp and the membership to be aware that we have prepared all of the documentation and have submitted it to, or will have submitted it by the end of today, to the DFI. We have Evan, our internal counsel, here as a part of the hangout to give us an update on that, at least from his perspective. Have I covered most of the salient points? Do you want to add some more information?
Yeah, they sent us a request for some pretty basic information, like how many purchasers were there, how much was raised, send us your materials you use for advertising, that kind of thing. And we're, of course, going to supply everything that they asked for.
Sweet. Yeah. So we met, was it yesterday or day before, at David Otto's office to finalize everything we wanted to put in the response. And I was just very thrilled as we sort of went over the points, like the fact that the membership response to the negotiations with our RChain Ventures actually changed the nature of the negotiation and shifted the structure of the deal that we have agreed with RChain Ventures. So
One thing that happened as part of that discussion was one of the questions is, what sort of control do the members have versus what the board has? And we were sort of going, well, members are very active, like surprisingly so. Like people are having direct input. Like they'll look at the contract that that we have had proposed to us, and they'll have like, actually, you should do this. And we're like, okay, well,
that makes sense. Let's do that.
That actually got into the version that we sent back to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been delighted, as we go through these kinds of review processes to see, how do our actions line up with not just with our philosophy, but with everything that we've said we wish to do and how we wish to operate in the world. And I've just been astounded by how much there is alignment and harmony between word and deed. So it's been very, very uplifting to kind of have these retrospectives that reflect on our the quality of our engagement as a cooperative. So very, very happy about this, and looking forward to seeing what the DFI has to say in response. We did uncover a little bit of messiness in the December sale. So there were some folks where we're still tracking down their accredited investor documentation. So just a heads up, if you were a part of that and you did not have, as a part of your interview or as a part of your process, if you did not submit your accredited investor details, then you must submit those to us. If you are not an accredited investor, we will have to revert the transaction. So there were only a handful of those transactions of the total transactions that happened. And sorry for any sloppiness there, but that's just the way things have to go.
If they were U.S. investor, correct? Not for foreign investors.
That's only U.S. That's correct. That's exactly right. Great. Okay. Any questions about everything that was said so far? DFI, governance forum, Delta Airlines, anything?
Yeah, I have a quick question. So, how much was is that process concluded? How much was raised during that last month, or is that private information?
No, it's not private information at all. So it was. I don't remember the exact number, but it was north of $12 million.
It was 18 point something.
Yeah.
Cool. That's good.
Yes, it was close to 19 million, but not quite. About 18.7.
Runaway train.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is less today, though.
Yeah.
So it'll be up tomorrow.
Yeah, maybe. Also on that, the board was made aware quite clearly from the membership that compensation in ROC needs to be reevaluated and quickly. So the board is trying to organize now a meeting to set a policy on how the price will be determined in ROC. And I had a couple ideas. I did post those in Discord, but we did have some great feedback already. And one of the members suggested, for instance, a 7-day weighted moving average, which could be particularly useful for smoothing out a little bit of volatility from a market, as well as getting some good idea about what its value might be. So we're going to look through the different options and come up with a policy quickly here so that we can kind of make sure that we're compensating people appropriately based on.
So, Kenny, has the compensation committee had any discussion or input about what to do with the contractors? Because I believe the current position of the board was we basically picked a price, and we're going to wait for the compensation committee to come to us with this is what you should do, and be like, okay.
I don't think that's under the compensation committee's directive, is it?
No, the compensation committee does compensation for what they
the board members and makes recommendation on
high level employees or something. Yeah. So those are so it's a little bit outside, but the feedback is welcome from any corner.
Kenny, could you include me in those discussions about the moving average? Because I'm going to do something similar as we use rocks for investments.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be able to say we're performing in the same manner as the co-op. It may not be the same number, but I'd love to have the same structure.
Sure. I can't remember what. Yeah, no, okay. I haven't posted any details yet, but I'll make sure to do that publicly as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay. So good discussion there. So moving right along, we've had our first pitch to ventures. I think, no, sorry, third pitch to ventures, but it was the first one that I was present to see. So the Resonate folks, you've heard me talk about them, they pitched to ventures just yesterday. So Peter Harris did a wonderful job of sort of walking the ventures team through the first level of engagement on sort of what Resonate is all about, what the touring and booking service does, and how that's part of a much larger vision, and sort of communicating that vision and some of the sequence that goes into that, and how the initial proceeds would be used. Greg, did you want to say any more about that?
Sure. No, I'll just iterate what you said, Greg. No, it was great, and we had I think we had George on there for a little while as well. And thank you, Greg, for joining us. So it was a good hour and a half long discussion. We've already got some of the tech guys doing their diligence portion right now. So yeah, we hope to get back to them and do something in the near future. So just a little more diligence, and we'll be ready to go. But impressive look at the company.
Yeah, I feel the same. It's like when you see the people that that Peter has assembled, from George Howard, who was one of the principals behind TuneCore, among other things, to Jeff Thompson from Off Axis. It's a very, very impressive team, and I'm very excited. And by the way, Peter has been able to secure a commitment from Imogen Heap to build her mycelia creative passport technology on top of RChain. So
yeah, that's a great ad. That really is. That's a big
freaking awesome.
Yep, that's a good one.
I'm very, very excited about this. This is really, really good news. So this is a huge win. And let's see. Trying to think if there's anything else along those lines. No, I think that's it. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time. So let me stop there and check in, see if there's any questions about any of the topics that we've covered, or anything that anyone else wants to cover, because I have a little bit of brain candy for the end.
Okay, I could give a little update about the community work.
Yes, please.
Okay, we are spanning the globe now, from Australia, Russia, China, Europe to the States. So that's awesome, and a lot of Chinese are boarding on. And there's a lot of translation work going on. And we have also a new person who is going to precede our Hangouts. That's Chantal Penning from Australia. And you can see her after this call live on the screen. So the decentralized budget and reward system is also going very fine. More and more people start to understand it. And that's about 10. And I expect at the end of the month it will be about 30 people who understand the system very well. That's about it.
HJ, could you also comment about, I don't know if we commented about this last week, but how robust the system is as well? And you've, so I'll let you explain, but that particular situation that you'd talked about from
Yeah. Okay. So there was some abuse of the system, and it got it got corrected immediately by other people. So in Nigeria, there was a guy who claimed a lot of money, and while doing nothing, and then the Chinese came up and they said, "Well, this is not correct." So for the month of January, he will be more or less punished by negative rewards. So almost he will get zero funds. But anyway, it was a kind of mistake because he was he was communicating through a phone, and then he filled out the spreadsheet not as he should have done it. So maybe you can get him a computer there, and his work will be much better. So in fact, it's a wonderful system because there's a peer control of what everybody is doing, and you need at least 3 persons to verify your work and your reward. So that's a good average, and well, in fact, you don't need managers above that. So we will see where it's going to head when there's more people boarding on. I think we are already at a state that we have to decentralize it more, so that you get small teams of like 30, 50 people that coordinate themselves. So does that cover it, Kenny?
So, HJ, would you be willing to give a presentation about this at the governance forum?
I could do that, but online.
Yeah, you can do. You can use Zoom. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's an excellent opportunity. I think it's a worldwide experiment for decentralized working together and remuneration. So there's a lot of nice side effects. Yeah.
Fantastic. Very, very good. Okay. Any other comments or questions from the community before I dive into a little bit of brain candy?
Yeah, Greg, I just one more thing. I don't know if you guys caught this. I think the first I heard about was actually, I think, in the RChain chat, but is everyone in here aware that Telegram will be creating its own blockchain?
Sweet. Not aware of it.
Not aware of it. So I'm very interested if they can get this done in time of so they have 200 million users.
It's fake news.
It's hugely ambitious. You gotta, I mean, there's a lot out there. They have not officially confirmed it. There's a lot of speculation and supposedly a white paper. I'll see if I can pull something and drop it in to the chat.
No, it'd be great. We should talk to them and see if we can help them.
Right. I certainly, when we get to Russia, Greg, they're all Russian, I believe, right? All the brothers that started that project. So we might be able to get in touch with them. It shouldn't be that difficult. Anyways, all right. Just a side note there.
Very good. Very good. Oh, you know what? Before I do the brain candy thing, there's a couple of other things I need to touch on. One, I need to introduce the new general manager for the CoOp. Lilia, can you unmute and turn your camera on?
Sorry, 1 second, Greg. Give me
Yeah,
one
take your time. You still there?
Hi, yes, I'm still here. I'm trying to think. Sorry, I had some give me one
It's okay.
second. Some bad reception earlier, so that's why.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Just as long as people can hear you, then they can see you next time.
Okay, definitely. Hi everyone. Thank you for welcoming me to the team. I'm very excited. Thank you, Greg. Yeah, I'm looking forward to meet everyone. I actually met quite a few people in Utah already, so but I'm excited and I'm looking forward to working together.
Yes, absolutely. So Lilia's first effort is she's helping me coordinate with our engagement with LICA. So that's the first effort, but she'll be taking on more and more tasks as she comes up to speed in this new style of working.
Yes, I'm actually not really used to this, but I'm getting slowly. I'm getting used to it. You know, I'm used to 9-to-5 job, but this is very different. But it's a new adventure. Well, I'm looking forward.
Absolutely. Lilia was you work. What was the bank that you worked in New York?
Yes, Safra. I don't know if anybody knows about Safra Bank. It's a private bank in New York.
Yeah. So that was the sort of your operations experience is what seems.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So great. Yes, I'm having experience of operations and client services and many other ones. In fact, we had before I left, we boarded a couple of companies also in blockchains and cryptocurrency, and I learned a little bit from them what they do, so I have a little bit of experience of that. So yes, I'm looking forward to share my experience and definitely learning new things, because the blockchains for me it's totally new, and I'm open to learn new things, definitely.
Awesome. It's great to have you on board.
Thank you so much, Greg.
Jonathan, I don't know if you gave an update last week on the meeting with the platform co-op folks.
No, not to the team. It went very well. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please do. Please go ahead.
Hello? Okay.
Yeah,
there was a great deal of resonance with the platform team. I have a really bad connection here.
Keep going. We can hear.
Okay, you can interpolate. The platform co-op is a project at the New School in New York, and Uta, I forget her last name, in Ottawa, who's a long-term mover and shaker in the internet. And they had a great deal of resonance with what RChain is doing as a co-op. And it looks very promising as far as moving forward with a collaboration with them. I believe Navneet is now the lead point person in that regard. Is that true, Navneet?
Hey, sorry, I was on mute. Can you repeat the last part? Sorry, I missed that. I was a little.
And I believe that after the back and forth after the meeting, that you designated yourself as the lead contact with Platform Co-op. Is that correct?
I mean, I can sign it up. I think we haven't talked to them yet. We exchange email, and I will follow up with them. I think they offered that day that Colin is going to can come and governance meeting, but we haven't heard from them yet.
Cool. All right. So yeah, it'd be great if they join us at the governance meeting, then we can have I think an even more high bandwidth discussion. I thought the discussion was very high bandwidth, and I thought there was a lot of good connection from both sides. So I'm quite hopeful that this could bear fruit in the not too distant future. Cool. So one more time, any further updates we want to touch base on before brain candy? Going once. Going twice. Okay, I'm gonna shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the stuff that I really enjoy. Let's see what we got here. Here we go. So on the flight back from Costa Rica, I took a swipe at a variant of the row calculus that I've been thinking about for about a decade, I remember in 2008, I was driving, it was a snowy night. I was driving from Seattle to Vancouver, Canada, and I conceived of this variant of the row calculus, but couldn't, over the last 10 years until just this past week, write down a satisfying version of it. So basically the idea is you want to utilize the notion of location that is provided by the zipper. So if you take a context and an instance, a pair, that provides a very natural notion of location. And so the question is, could you make row calculus names that are locations in other row calculus terms? And it turns out the answer is yes. You absolutely can. So I'll just quickly walk people through how that works. So essentially, the big change from the row calculus that is the heart of Rowlang is that names are not quoted processes, but quoted locations, where a location again is a context and a process. So a process is what? Well, it's the stopped process, or the usual suspects like input guarded processes and output processes and parallel composition, and then unquoting a quoted process to start running it again. So those are the usual suspects. And then there are two new ones. And one is derived from the work that Mike and I did, where we reified a kind of catalyst we said you have to have this catalyst in order to have parallel composition of an output and an input reduce. But there, the catalyst is sort of in the background. It's not a first-class citizen in the calculus. It's only available in the models of the calculus. Here, I've just taken the liberty to take those catalysts and push them up into a first-class entity. So, but now there's one thing that's different from that work, which is that the catalyst takes a context as a parameter. And then the other thing is to be able to update, do an in-place destructive modification of a location in a term, and that's what this term does. And you can get a better feel for these things when you look at the behavioral rules. But before we get there, one quick point. I need to say what a context is. So a context is basically a term with a hole in it. So either a context is just the hole itself. So when you plug a term into a hole, you just get the term back. Or it's an input guarded context, or it's an output context, or it's a parallel composition context. So that's the recursive way to form contexts. And now you can kind of see, if you take a look, if you squint at this, you'll see that the first name ever is going to be a pair, which is the empty context or the hole, and the zero process. So that kind of shows you can get the whole thing off the ground, which is a good thing. The recursion is well founded. Once we have sort of the syntactic structure spelled out, we can talk about the behavior. I'm eliding the structural equivalence because it's very, very straightforward to do. But here we have the usual reduction where an input meets an output, but in order to reduce, there has to be this catalyst present, this COM catalyst. And when the catalyst is present, it has a context available. And so then this whole thing can reduce, and what it does is it takes the K from here and the Q from there and forms a location. And that gives you a name, and that's the name that's put in place for Y here. Sorry, I got that backwards. It should be, I should have turned this around. It should be Y from X. But hopefully, the typo notwithstanding, you can see how this is just a mild variant on the row calculus. And then the other one, the update, the in-place update, is when you run the update mechanism in parallel with a dereference. So this is a name that is that has been dereferenced. So the name is the pair, it's the location, the context, and the process, and then the dereference. Then it creates one of these catalysts and throws away, using K from the pair here, and throwing away the Q. And there are variants of this where we are linear in the queue, and I'll give you an example of one in just a minute. But then the final thing that we have to do is to modify the substitution mechanism. So the only equation that's different from the usual row calculus equations for substitution is what happens when you substitute one of these pairs here for a y in deref for y. And as one might expect, what that does is it simply runs Q inside the context K. So this new kind of calculus gives us the ability to reason about processes in a more ambient-like fashion. So this combines the reflection and together with the this context idea, together with the tree rewrite. So we get higher order, we get the standard pi calculus communication, and we also get this tree rewrite capability. So we get all of the major calcules, different approaches are combined into a single calculus. Now, to be more linear in Q, so you don't throw Q away when you do the update, you can imagine that you provide a name to this operator here. So you make it parametric in some name, and then rather than just throwing Q away, you make Q available on that name. And then if you wanted it to be even more scoped, then what you do is provide a pair of names, one of which has to match up with the target deref, and the other is where you're going to provide the Q. So those are two variants of this calculus. And now let's just take a look at a simple calculation. So as I said before, here's the first name. The first name is the quoted pair, which is the empty context and the stopped process. So if we wait on that name for some name, and we don't know what that is, and whatever that is, we start running it, right? Then if we and we send P on this name with the catalyst K prime, then if you just run the calculations as before, you'll see that immediately what happens in a single step is you get that P is now running inside K prime. So essentially P moved from this output context into K prime. And now if K prime is of the form that matches this one here, with some extra junk over here, then essentially P moves over to K double prime. And so what this shows is that we now have a mechanism where you can kind of transport processes through a range of contexts. And this gives us the ability to start talking about processes or behaviors as if they were objects that move in space. So we can build up a notion of co-location. That's when two processes can interact. We can build up a notion of distance and a variety of things, and that's sort of why I call this the row calculus in space. This is fundamentally different from Cardelli and Gardner's idea, where they take a pi calculus and they use vectors as names. So they're making an assumption of geometry. Here we can build up a notion of geometry from the notion of behavior that's available within the calculus. So the structure function relationship in the calculus gives rise to a notion of geometry. So that is one of the desiderata or motivations for a calculus like this. And it just so happens that Mike and the Pyrofex team have been thinking a little bit about the structure of namespaces to make them more efficient. It turns out that their ideas were leading them in an ambient calculus direction. And so here is an alternative to the ambient calculus that's sort of more row-like, but gives them the sort of same programmable tree capability that the ambient calculus provides. So that's row calculus in space. Any questions about that for anyone?
Yeah, I've got a question, Greg. So
Yes.
in the previous implementation for a namespace, that gives us a couple unique properties in the sense of parallelism and knowing when any process is going to conflict or with another.
Mm-hmm.
So this holds that same property and adds additional properties such as you mentioned before, either distance or I guess even magnitude, so you would know how large something might be if they're all kind of nestled together. Or what kind of practical benefits might we be able to extract from this new geometry or new deduction in what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, so there are lots and lots of practical benefits. So you're absolutely right. You can talk about things like magnitude or size. You can talk about things like locale. So you can say within this region we have fail-fast properties. You can talk about nested locations. So if you go look at just to give people some background, they may not be aware of this, but there's been a long search for what would be called dpi, or a distributed pi, where you had a notion of processes running in particular regions, and none of those proposals have been convincing in the sense that we understood how those regions were related to process structure. They are the notion of region structure is sort of bolted on the side. And here we have a very, very clear notion of region or locale that's derived from the process structure. So you don't have those things aren't at odds. So it allows you to reason not just, but here we can go a bit further. You won't reason just topologically in terms of some forest-like structure or nested tree-like structure. Here you can talk much more precisely about distance, which allows us to do all kinds of fun stuff with respect to cost analysis, or load balancing, or those kinds of things. That's the host of practical applications. I'll be honest, the application that I have had in mind for the last 10 years is more abstract. I'm going after physics. Wheeler has this idea that physics ought to arise from information. So his program is called It from Bit. And here, we've got a mechanism whereby we can begin to affect some of Wheeler's intuitions, where we can get a notion of metric that's correlated to behavior. So the metric can change as the process evolves. So one could imagine, sort of quantized version of Einstein's field equations here, where because clearly the calculus is quantized, right? You've got discrete steps of time. You've got discrete structure, but we can still build this kind of geometric apparatus on top of it. So those are the applications that I'm going after.
And so, to be clear, are you talking about description of physics or creation of physics?
Well, from my point of view, physics is largely descriptive, right? So we build models and we check to see if those models correspond to our experience in the world.
Okay.
Right. And
That's
so this
pretty cool anyway.
yeah. I mean, I mean, you know, because it's Turing complete, we could build alternative physics, right? So if you wanted to build a game engine on this, I'm not sure it would be the most efficient way to build a game engine, but you could certainly give it a go.
And then for the idea of distance, like you were saying, it gives us ways to calculate things. This would be very similar to, for an analogy would be if you knew that New York and Los Angeles are, quote, 2,000 miles apart, you'd know you'd need more fuel to get there, as opposed to, you know, knowing that they're from Seattle to Tacoma is less distance, so you need less fuel to get there, and all of the energy required to make either those transits more efficient or faster, or whatever the computation might be. You'd have an idea of how hard it would be to actually connect two things, and you could reduce that or know that ahead of time.
Yes, that's the idea. That's exactly the idea. Yeah. Cool. Those are great questions. Go ahead, Jim.
Does this correspond to the directed asynchronous graph of the RChain itself, or how are they related?
Yeah, I mean, there are lots and lots of graphs that live within any sort of process network. So when we talk about the RChain network, we're really talking about a bunch of nodes, and those nodes are implementing a bunch of processes. Presumably, you could rewrite all of those nodes, and at some point we will when we do a bootstrap. You could rewrite those nodes as row calculus processes. You know, to date, they're implemented on top of the JVM, but eventually they'll be implemented on top of the row VM. So in that sense, you can look at the entire network as a one giant row calculus process, which is a parallel composition of a bunch of smaller row calculus processes. Once you have that insight, then you can start to talk about whether or not those processes are close together or far apart. And that's what you'd like to be able to do, is to say, you know, what does it mean for them to be close together or far apart, right? And, you know, does that close together or far apart correspond to spatio-temporal close together far apart in, you know, in the sense of, you know, like geography that we know on planet Earth, or does it correspond to some other characteristics, like how easy it is for two processes to communicate because they're wired together with a high bandwidth fiber or optic cable, versus others which have only a thin modem cable between them. Does that answer your question, Jim? Sweet. Yes, it might make state channels more efficient. That's correct. Hi, Peter. Did you just join us, or have you been on a while?
I've been here for a few minutes, being completely confused, and
yeah. If you missed the preamble to that, you're not. Yeah, forget it.
Well, why don't you share your? We'll switch gears entirely, and then we've been running on at length here. I don't want to run over too much, but share your impressions of the pitch from yesterday.
I think it went really well. I think the Ventures team had lots of very insightful questions. They went pretty deep on a lot of different topics, and I think that was a good indicator of interest, showing that they were really, thinking about the issues that I was raising. And so I think it was pretty good. Would love to hear your feedback and your impression of the call as well.
Yeah. I told the team earlier, I felt that the call went really well. I thought you did a great job of presenting. You were obviously relaxed. You were obviously very much in command of the information. And it was very clear you had a great team of folks around you, and that you've been working hard at this for several years. So, I mean,
yeah, it's been running for a while.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought it was a good, accurate representation of where you are, and where you are is light years ahead of every other project that I've heard about in this space.
Thank you.
So yeah, that was I thought, very good presentation. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So unless there's anything else we want to talk about, we can call this community hangout to a close. And I thank everyone for participating. As usual, fantastic engagement. And please come to the governance forum. If you have any problems getting to the governance forum because of finances, send to rchain.requests@gmail.com with the subject title Governance Forum Travel Support. I think I got that right. And we will see what we can do. So talk to you soon. Thanks again, Christian.
Yep.
So
yeah, take care, guys. Later on. Peace.
Peace.
Later.